with me if you want to live. You just don't turn it off!
Death Hunt was released in 1981, directed by Peter R. Hunt, and starring Charles Bronson, Lee Marvin, Andrew Stevens, and Carl Weathers. In 1931 Canada, Yukon trapper Johnson has a feud with this dog owner, who later retaliates by publicly accusing Johnson of murder and thus triggering a police manhunt in the wilderness. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Backtrack Cinema. My name is Jason, and welcome to my review of Death Hunt, another Charles Bronson review we'll be looking at today. This was a first-time watch for me, and right away, it's a mountain man movie. It's a wilderness movie, so I love stuff like that, like Jeremiah Johnson, like The Mountain Men with Charlton Heston. Love movies like this. And, you know, the elephant in the room here. Man, does this movie have some First Blood vibes. And this was a year before First Blood, I might add. You know, when you read up on First Blood, and I think at one time when they were shopping the script around who they would want to play John Rambo, one of the names that come up was Charles Bronson, which I just found really odd that he could play Rambo, right? But after watching this, I get there was a version with Charles Bronson that you could have adapted, I think, on some level after watching this movie. But you also got Carl Weathers in here in this movie, and you know, him being Apollo Creed in all the Rocky movies. So there's kind of an odd First Blood Stallone connection, whatever you have it in this movie. You go on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 17% Rotten Tomatoes score with the critics, but a 70% with the fans, with the audience. So obviously the audience was liking what they were seeing, but the critics thought it was just kind of lame. But basically what you have here is Charles Bronson comes in to this town and he sees these guys, you know, fighting their dogs with each other, and he goes and saves one of the dogs, buys the dogs off the guy. This guy gets freaking pissed, goes to get revenge to get his dog back and all that, and someone dies, and then Charles Bronson gets blamed as this guy killing everybody. And so the RCMP has to put out a manhunt to go chase him through the Canadian wilderness. It's pretty much like a manhunt movie, a man on the run, the RCMP, trappers, all these local people going after him. It's set in 1931. Apparently it was based on a true story. A guy in Canada in the 30s, named Albert Johnson, who Charles Bronson plays, that you know, a huge manhunt happened. You have to suspend disbelief. Apparently it's not that accurate of a film and all that, like most movies aren't, right? There's some fun here. The setting is great. You know, the landscape up in the Canadian wilderness, the mountains, especially when they get higher up, and you know, all the mountains are full of snow and everything. Really rugged, really isolated. You know, you feel isolated, you feel cold. Charles Bronson plays this mountain man named Johnson, and you know, that real quiet toughness again, the like kind of character that Charles Bronson can play well. And they're pretty much chasing him halfway across the territory here. And I was talking about the First Blood vibes. One of the big scenes in this was they go to blow up his cabin. Completely reminded me when Rambo is in the mines there, the cave there, and they blow up the cave and everything like that. Almost identical, man. It's crazy. Now, First Blood is a way better movie. It handles themes a lot better. There's not a lot of character development in this movie. There's not a lot of characterization with a lot of the characters here and stuff like that. It pretty much is an action thriller chasing Charles Bronson through this wilderness. There's this little subplot too of the Mad Trapper, where there's mountain men up there where he kills people and takes their gold teeth. He pulls their gold teeth out of them and keeps them and stuff like that. And that kind of gets pinned on with Charles Bronson and stuff like that. Later, we find out who the real Mad Trapper is. But take the movie on its own terms. It's just a manhunt chase movie kind of thing. Now, we got some other characters too. We love seeing Carl Weathers in this.
The way I hear told, Hazel's mama didn't know if he was a boy or a girl till he was about 15. And she didn't much care a few years later when he turned vicious.
You know, usually I'm a huge Rocky fan, a huge Predator fan to see him in those movies. But see, this was a surprise. I had no idea he was in this movie. And he's a character from Louisiana who came all the way up, and he's like one of the best trackers. You know, he was going to be a pitcher back in the South. a baseball pitcher, and he just, you know, life happens and he ends up here. And he works at this outpost along with Lee Marvin and Andrew Stevens. Lee Marvin being the wise, old, experienced, rugged captain of the RCMP, and a young fella comes in, Andrew Stevens. He's, you know, just wants to do his job, wants to do his duty. He's very young, naive, and still believes in all this honor code and stuff like that. And Lee Marvin's kind of like seen everything, done everything. You know, he has a past where, you know, he believed in something at once, but almost doesn't really believe in the job, believe what he's doing anymore. And so you get a contrast of the young and the old here. You know what I mean? But going back to Carl Weathers for a minute, just they're playing poker, like they're playing a card game at the table inside, and just his laugh and everything just brought a smile to my face because that laugh is just so iconic, so full of charm. This character, I loved Carl Weathers in this movie, and him and Lee Marvin are have this mutual respect for each other and all that kind of stuff. So I just love seeing him in this movie. But you see, Lee Marvin just wants to get out of this situation peacefully. He tries to bring Charles Bronson in peacefully so no one will get hurt. But there's always stupid idiots, arrogant idiots in these movies. And situations happen where he can't do that. He ends up chasing him and has to bring him in, has to kill him if need be. At the end of the movie, Lee Marvin has kind of this change of heart. He kind of goes, it's kind of like a dilemma between his duty or what his heart thinks. And I think deep in his heart, he knows this guy is really innocent in all this. Like, this is all started because these guys were, you know, abusing their freaking dogs, for heaven's sakes, right? And Charles Bronson comes in and saves the dog. You know what I mean? Does this sound like a killer to you? Like, does this sound like a mad trapper to you? So he ends up doing what's right and ignores his duty and all that kind of stuff. So Charles Bronson just gets away at the end, but there's another mountain man that kind of takes the fall, so to speak. Now, I could have used a little more action in this movie. I know it was just 1981, but I could have used a little more action. I wanted to see Charles Bronson setting people up a lot more. Like, you just see him on the run through most of it. There's a couple cool action scenes and stuff like that, but he's basically just on the run, running from them. They even get this, you know, this crazy pilot to come after him and everything like that. There were some cool scenes where Charles Bronson jumps on a tree and he's hanging off a tree, just like First Blood, man. I would just like to see a lot more of Charles Bronson setting all these guys up, not killing them or anything, but maybe maiming them. You know what I mean? But yeah, like this whole atmosphere and the vibe, the whole manhunt aspect of everything, like the forest scene in First Blood, is very reminiscent in this movie. Like, there's similarities, and I think if you like First Blood, I think you'll like this movie. Or you really don't get to know a hell of a lot about Charles Bronson in this movie, his character or anything. You're kind of following mostly Lee Marvin, Carl Weathers, and Andrew Stevens' characters, the RCMP. I think we should have got to know them a little bit more. They had opportunity to do a lot more storytelling than they did, but they don't. They just make it more into this chase kind of movie, and that brings the movie down a little for me. I mean, because they had opportunity to do some really good storytelling in here, especially when you had such likable characters like with Lee Marvin and Carl Weathers. You know what I mean? You had a lot there that you could have done with. But at the end of the day, guys, it is a great little action thriller, manhunt, survival in the wilderness. If you like all that kind of stuff, with some pretty charming characters, I think you'll really like this movie. So next Sunday afternoon, why not try some Death Hunt? Give her a go, man. Let me know what you think. So I'm going to give Death Hunt from 1981 a C+. Well, what about you guys? Let me know in the comments what you think of Death Hunt. Do you like it? Don't you like it? Let's have a great discussion on another Charlie Bronson movie. Don't forget to watch your next video right here. Got lots of Charles Bronson reviews for you to check out, especially the Death Wish series. I've already done all of them and a ranking, so go down that rabbit hole. My name is Jason. You're watching Backtrack Cinema. I thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and I'll see you in the movies. Cheers.